Alright, welcome to this video. We're going to go over Photopea and creating a cityscape. So the first thing you want to do is hit File, New, go to Insta Story right here. You could also pick FB Event Image if you want. The top one right here, FB Event Image, is, I'm guessing, Facebook event, but this is the same ratio that we're looking for when we do HD or 1080p, and this is vertical 1080p. So we can click Insta Story for the vertical, and we'll say, Cityscape here. So we can click Instant Story for the vertical and we'll say Cityscape. And then we'll make sure this 1080, 1920, 72. If this were reversed, it would be horizontal. You flip this to reverse it. Make sure it's 1080 first in the width and then hit create. Next step we want to do is we want to pick a background color. So now that we're in here, we can manipulate Photoshop or Photopea. The way you move around is you hold space on the keyboard and left click to move. So space on the keyboard, left click to move. Space and control on the keyboard to left click and drag to zoom. And that's how you can move around in your document. Now to create a cityscape, we're going to want to use tools and we're going to want to change colors and things like that. So try to follow along. First thing we want to do is pick a background color. So I'm going to pick a color over here on the left. These are our colors. We have foreground, background. This is not the background for out here. This is just your color swatches, or your color pickers, sorry. Your swatches are up over here, but you don't need to really use those that often. Really, you just kind of pick your colors on the fly right here. So we click this box right here on the left, and if we want to reset it, we could. So if we picked like red and then we wanted to reset it to black, we could just click these boxes. And if we want to flip up, we can right here, or we can hit X on the keyboard to do the same. So we click this box, we pick a color. I'm going to pick like a off pink, maybe a little bit more red in the pink. And then I'm just going to use my paint bucket. If you don't see your paint bucket and it looks like this, click, left click and hold, and drag down to, like, keep holding the click and go over to paint bucket. Then you just fill this area. Another way to fill would be to go to your brush and scale it up. You can scale right here. You can change the hardness right here of the brush to show you. Here's hard brush, and then the hardness down, you get a soft brush. So you can do that right here. We change it to hardness and scale it up and scale right here. And if you want to do that stuff on the fly, you can just by holding Alt with the brush active. You'll Alt on the keyboard, right click, and you can drag left and right for size, up and down for hardness. And then you can fill it with pink that way. Now, I want to add a background in here. So the next thing I'm going to do is add a folder called background. And I'm going to put a layer inside over here. So I added a folder. I double clicked on its name, or double click the name. Sorry, not just double click, but click the name to rename it. I think you can also rename it by going to, nope, apparently it's just double click right here. And then once you have your folder, you'll click this little sticky note looking thing, which is new layer, and you'll create a new layer inside. If the layer is not inside the folder, just drag it in by left clicking and dragging it into that. And now we can add a sun. So I'm going to Alt right click to scale my brush, and I'm going to drag left and right. I'm going to make sure my sun is hard, not soft. And I'm going to, that's basically talking about the edge of the brush, in case you don't know. So I'm going to select a white here, and I'm going to click a dot in the center, or roughly in the center, and then I can use my move tool if I want to move it around and see where the center line is. And you can also hold control on the keyboard to move as well, the same way as the move tool. But it's not snapping with my control, so if I want to get that snapping, I can use the move tool. Next step is to add layers. So I want to kind of create like this blooming layer effect of the sun. So I'll duplicate this layer, and then I'll go Edit, Retransform, and I'll hold Alt on the keyboard to scale from the center. And just to show you what it looks like, I'll lower the opacity first, down to like 30 or something. I'll go to Edit, Retransform again, hold Alt, and you see I'm scaling the lower opacity layer. Then I can duplicate this layer again, go to Edit, Retransform, scale it again, and we'll get this like bloom effect. Then I'll make one more layer above all those, and I'll go back to my brush tool, and I'll scale it, Alt right click, change the hardness to all the way down or 0. And I'll make sure that it's larger than the circle, and I'll click a few times, get this like bloom effect, and lower the opacity, so I get this almost sunshine look to it. And I can change the opacities on these background layers now, or the background blooms of the sun, just to kind of make it blend to the eye the way I would like. Once I get that, then we can start making our building. So I'll make another folder, double click, I'll call it midground, and we'll add a layer inside just like before. So I made a folder, double clicked on the name, named it, and then I added a layer with a sticky note looking thing. And if the layer is not inside, I just drag it into the layer. Now that I have that, I can go to my rectangle tool and I can start selecting. So if I select simple shape, it'll look kind of like a building. So if I were to click here, click the pink that I use out here and then make it a little bit gray. So we get kind of like that effect of the sunlight sky hitting it. And then I fill this in with a brush, etc. That's a little too light, so I'm going to go a little bit darker on the gray. You don't want to do too light when you're doing buildings because it'll blend with the sky. But notice these buildings look very basic. We don't want to go for basic, so in order to start getting more interesting look, start thinking about the building in like vertical sections. So how I would do that is I would just create a layer like I did. I just turned the layer up, but I could delete it just by selecting it and hitting delete on the keyboard, or right click and delete. But with this tool, the selection rectangle select tool, I'm just going to start building my building by holding shift and doing different parts of the building. And you'll see here shortly, once I do this for you goes, I'll start to get something that looks like a silhouette of a building in the distance. And then I can fill that in with a layer. And then I could do it over here as well, where I can add a lot of interesting shapes to it. And we'll just keep adding. If you get something like that, it's just an error. Don't worry about it. Just click off of it and keep going. It's not going to affect it. So here I'll just add a bunch of these. And I'm just adding intricate edge work to it to try to create something more unique for a building style. And then we'll clean that up, maybe add something here, just like smaller selections, all while holding shift. So I did that. Now I got these cool looking buildings in the background, and they feel like they're further back because of the lightness. So the next layer, the foreground, I'm going to go foreground. In this folder, I'm going to add a layer to it. In this layer, I'm going to add more buildings. But what I'm going to want to do is also darken the inspection, so that way when you look at the building, it feels like it's coming forward and not just the same depth as the layer in the background. So here you can see I select my brush tool, I go to edit, or not edit, I go to the color picker, I drag this down a little bit down here to get a slightly darker gray, and then I fill this in. And with this layer being on a different layer, I can hold control or grab the move tool, and I can move this around to position it how I see fit to work with the layer behind it. So if I want, I can move this, I can go to my midground, and I can select this area and move this as well. So I can move this to position it better if I wanted, something like that. I could also go to edit pre-transform if I wanted to say scale this to be like larger or smaller, create a look with the background layer. You don't have to do that, it's just describing how you can use these separate layers to make your life easier. So I'll select this foreground layer again, edit, re-transform, I'll scale it down a little bit. I'm going to scale it down, but I'm going to add a little bit more onto the top. So I'm going to take my rectangle tool. I'm just going to add a little bit more up here. And add a little bit more here. Something like that. We added that to the layer. Next, I'm going to add another one over here. So I'm going to add one here. And again, we're creating this like platform or cityscape type look. So it doesn't have to be like photorealistic, but we are kind of trying to create something interesting to look at. Just because it's meant to be like part of a world, right? So that's with the rectangle select. Now we're doing this. And we'll fill that in now. Now we got something like that. And then we can go to our super foreground or foreground. Maybe it should have been like mid foreground and then foreground, but I'm just going to call it super foreground. And I'm going to add a layer in here. Now I would add my top buildings. And in order to do this, I'm going to do it with my polygon lasso tool. To get that, I'm going to left click on the lasso tool and hold and go to polygon lasso tool. On a new layer, the super foreground, I'm going to just click, and this tool lets you create like diagonals with it, which can be interesting, more interesting than just like regular rectangle shapes. So I'm just going to click through here, making like interesting diagonal shapes and trying to get something that looks a little bit more interesting than just rectangles. And then I'm going to select slightly darker again to get it to feel like it's moving forward for us. And if I want to take the rectangle tool and clean up some of these areas in here, I can just do that by dragging in here and then hitting delete, make it flatter if I wanted. I can also do some other things in here, but we'll save that for a little bit later. So we'll just delete this, or actually let me delete here, that corner, and then delete this. Just kind of creating a different shape there. Then here I might add like a rectangle, and then I might add another one here just to make it more interesting. It's all about adding little details where you can to make it more interesting when you can. Out here, I'm going to build the structure of my base building first. And then I'm going to use the polygon lasso tool to add to it. So here we'll do this. Just cut some of this up. That's too far over. Get some of that out. And then, yeah, we'll just go through here, adding to and taking away from. And then we'll add here. And then maybe cut this back just a little bit. Cut that back a little bit. Kind of like this. And then maybe there. Something like that. Then we'll take the brush, fill it in. Now I'll take the polygon lasso tool right here. And I can add like little details up here. Switch to my brush tool. Polygon lasso tool again. Make sure we're on the right layer. And then I'll just add some interesting shapes here. And I'm switching to my brush to fill it in. I can also go to edit fill to fill in and just make sure my foreground color, the top color, and it says foreground. I hit OK. That works too. So we can do that. Edit fill. And we can just make like interesting little shapes to better fit the style we're going for. And I'll scale down my brush here just so I can easily fill these things in. And then we'll do rectangle, I'll swap to that. Now another cool thing you can do is on a layer. So if I have this layer, right, and I want to duplicate something, I can just grab this layer right here and Control Alt and drag. So on this layer, I drag select over what I want, Control Alt and drag, and now I get this, and then I go to edit, retransform, edit, or right click and flip horizontally. And I can add this in over here, and now it's a part of this layer as well. Or it's now moved over here, but it's still a part of the layer, if that makes sense. So then I could do the same thing here, Control Alt drag. Then I could do get rid of this section, because I don't want that section right there. And then if I wanted, I could take, say, these two bars, and I could do the same thing. Drag this out. Fill this in a little bit. Then we get something like this. So the next step is to add wires. So how would you add wiring across this? Pretty easily, really. You would just make a layer above all of this. So we'd make a top layer, maybe call it wires. And add a new layer inside of that folder. And we go to our brush tool. And with the same color as our super foreground, we would just come in here and we'd change our smoothing to like 50 to get smoother brushes. And then we would just drag across to create like almost like a city wires dragging across. Now the main thing here is to make sure your brush size is around 2 or 3 so that it doesn't feel ginormous. And once we have our wires in, it starts to feel a little bit more alive. And we would add the next step, which is to maybe add some wires into our foreground or our foreground section. So we can add wires this way too, where we can just go above our foreground and we can select our foreground color, which is this middle, and we'll just drag some wires this way, creating a further back appearance. And if we wanted to scale the brush down to 2, it'd probably help so that the wires are a little bit further back as well, just slightly smaller. And another thing we can do after we do that is we can lower the opacity just to blend a little bit with anything in the background. And that'll help sell the wires as well. So if we just lower the opacity down, you'll notice it kind of blends a little bit better. Same thing with this wire. It would do the same if you just lower it down a little bit. Just kind of blends a little bit. You don't want to go too low, but creating like a wire effect or wires hanging across. And the last step that we add is we add a cloud layer or fog layer over everything. So we add fog, and we could add a layer inside of the fog folder, and we'll make our brush white. Now to add fog, you just scale your brush up a little bit, and you make hardness all the way down. And then you basically just start painting around the edges. And then you turn the opacity way down to get this like fog effect around the outside. And you do this like once, twice, maybe 3 times to get like a layering effect of fog. But you got to make sure you play with the opacity when you're doing this, because you don't want them to have the opacity on then stacked. But you want it to kind of work together to create like a layered fog effect. And then the final thing, final thing is in the midground or the background, actually, either one, you can make cloud layer. So I'll just make a layer and call it cloud. And then in here, I'll make my brush small, or right click and make the brush small. And I'll make sure the brush's hardness is soft. And I'll just click a bunch of little dots, creating a random cloud shape. And I'll do that over here as well. And I might add one more back here, maybe one more. And then once you do that, you basically just take this and duplicate it. And we're going to turn this eye off for now so we can see this one. We're going to lower the opacity a little bit. And we're going to turn this one back on so now it's bright. We're going to go to our eraser tool, which is 2 down from the brush. And we're going to make sure it is smaller. And we're going to make sure it's soft as well. We're just going to erase a little bit in random spots, creating like a layered cloud effect. And that's how you can easily generate like a cloud look. And then shift select both of these layers. So click one, hold shift, click the other, or click one, hold control, and click the other. Put them in a folder together and call it clouds. Now this folder is inside of the midground folder, and we can lower the opacity on that as well to blend it a little bit more with the background. And that's how you create a cityscape inside of Photoshop, Photopea, either one. And yeah, the more details you add, the better it'll look. So just remember, when you're working with this, you want to add details. You want to work from big to small, background to foreground. To start with the sky, work forward, building your way. As you get closer, things get darker and more vivid in colors, so remember that as well. And follow along with the video, do your best, and hopefully you'll get something like this. All right, see you later.